Hi everybody, this is a video going over our first assignment, which is the study review paper. And here is our syllabus, and I'm going to start here to go over what are the parts of the paper. It's certainly highlighted here. I'll give a little bit more information, and I'll talk a little bit about how you can find your articles. So I'll get to this after this part, which is how do you find a peer-reviewed journal article, which is an empirical study about developmental issues. So I'm going to get into that after this little part about the paper itself. But basically, an empirical study is one that collects data. So the empirical study will usually have one to several research questions that it will be looking at. It will find, I shouldn't say it, the authors collect a sample, they find some people to collect data from. They'll report methodologies, so they'll report different research methodologies to collect their data. This is why this is related to the chapter 1 when we're talking about different methods used in developmental psychology. And then they'll take those data and they'll analyze those data and then interpret those data in relationship to the research questions that they raised at the beginning of the study. So that's basically what an empirical study is. They collect data and they analyze the data. So some of you may be familiar with research studies in psychology and some of you may not. So I'm going to give you a hint here about how to read the studies. So the first part of a study is the abstract. And so when you look in an article, there'll be the title and authors and maybe some notes under the authors, and then there'll be an indented small paragraph. That indented small paragraph, and it's indented on two sides, is an abstract. The abstract is a summary of the study, of the article. The abstract is also what you'll see when you're doing searches for the article. So the description of the article is typically the abstract itself. So you'll read the abstract to see if it's actually an interesting study. You might have a title that you think is really interesting, but it turns out to be not so interesting. So you can simply read the abstract and see if you want to get knee-deep into the article or not. So read the abstract, and that will be important. And then there's 4 parts to the paper. There's an introduction, there's a method section, a results section, and a discussion section. And so in the introduction, that you should read very carefully, and you should be able to understand that. So the introduction is not very technical, it's more about arguments. And so the introduction specifies the research question or questions. It will review the literature, the previous literature, previous research on those research questions. Specifically, they should be building an argument about what's happening. So if A is related to B, variable A is related to variable B, why is that? Why does A influence B? So those types of conceptual arguments are being made in the introduction. Any introduction ends usually with hypotheses, but that just follows from their logic. So those conceptual arguments about what's happening here is really important to read. And there should be some stuff about the topic of development that you're interested in that introduction. So read the introduction carefully. The second section is a method section. The method section is about how they got their data. This section can be quite technical, but I'm fine if you want to sort of skim it. Some of it might be a little bit technical and you might not understand it, that's fine. So you can skim it, but get a good sense of who their sample was, how did they get their sample, and how did they get their data? What research methods did they use? You don't have to know the very technical details of it, but was it a self-report? Was it an observer report? If it was observers, who were the observers? So how did they get their data? So get that sense of who they got their data from and how they got their data. And then the results section is the statistics. So I know that some of you have not had statistics, and even if you've had statistics, you might not feel so confident about that. You can skip the results section. The results section is very technical, and if you don't know statistics, it might be very confusing. So I'm fine if you skip the results section. And the nice thing about skipping that is that you still will find out what happened, because in the last section, which is the discussion section, the first thing they should do in the discussion section is summarize the findings from the results. So you'll know what they found. And then the big part of the discussion section is interpreting those findings. What does it mean? What does it mean about development? What does it mean about the research questions that they asked in the introduction? So it's interpreting the findings. And the discussion is going to be very much linked to the issues that were raised in the introduction. So to summarize, read carefully the introduction and discussion sections. Those are the most important for you to read in this class. Skim the method section to get a good sense of who their sample was and how they collected their data, what research methodologies they used. Skip the results section because it's very technical, and if you don't know stats, it's going to confuse you. So what I'll say is, before I go on, and I'll hopefully repeat this later, you need to pre-approve the article with me, because I'm afraid people will choose a non-empirical article and they'll write this whole paper and they'll get a very bad grade. So email me two things. Email me the citation. The citation is the authors, the title of the article, the journal it was published in. That's the citation. You know, you've seen it a billion times, I'm sure. It's like what you would see in a reference section of a paper. And copy the abstract so I can see the abstract. Do not send any more information. Only send me the citation and the abstract in an email. If you send more information, I may not respond or say, watch this video again and see what you're supposed to do. And definitely do not send me links. So sometimes people send me a link, for one, that just has a big mess of information. So your job is to show me only what I need, the citation and the abstract. The link would have a lot of stuff I'd have to wade through. That's not my job. That's your job for this assignment. And then also, those links are often dead. And so if you send me a link, it's probably dead because it's only active during your search. So don't send me links. So again, when you read the article, it should be something that makes sense to you, because if you concentrate on the introduction, discussion, anybody should be able to read that and sort of get a good sense of what things are about. So this assignment is not overly technical, and you don't need to know a lot about psychology or research or statistics to do it. So let's get into how to write your paper. So there's a 4-page limit. And sometimes people ask me various questions about this. It's a 4-page limit. I'm not reading beyond 4 pages. Do not have any sort of headers, like don't put your name, don't put the class, don't put my name, don't put a date. Those things I already know. I know who I am. I know what this class is. I know who you are because it's recorded on Blackboard. I see who's written that paper. So don't put all that stuff in this paper. You're going to be wasting space that you need to write. Also, in this class, we're doing what's called sort of a medium level of APA style. For this assignment, I'm not going to be grading APA style. It would be very helpful to have a reference section at the end of your paper. It doesn't count as your pages, so it can be your 5th page. And should be your 5th page, and just say references and list the article that you're reviewing. That would be fine with me. But I'm not going to grade the APA style for this assignment because that's not the big thing for it in terms of small stuff with APA style. I do want it to be APA style in the sense that you should be very straightforward and clear in your writing. Your writing should be concise and not repetitive. Your writing should be clear. I should understand what you're saying. And you can definitely use first person if you want. In APA style, first person is allowed, especially if it helps you avoid passive language. So you may have taken other classes where they said you can't use first person when you write, and you end up writing these really strange sentences that sound what we say is passive. But you know, if you hear it and it sounds weird, it sounds like it's very indirect and strange way of saying that. APA style allows for first person, so you don't have to write such weird sentences. The only thing I'll say is use the proper first person. Don't say we. Sometimes I see students say we. Well, that's not what, you're not a we, you're an I. So you're writing this paper, so you're an I. So you can use first person. And in fact, it's encouraged if it helps you avoid those weird passive sentences. And it will be really hard to write a really good paper in less than 3.5 pages. If you're less than 3.5 pages, probably not that great of a paper. You're probably not expressing enough ideas. You're not clarifying your ideas. You're not expanding your ideas. You don't have enough ideas. So very likely you're going to be in the 3.5 to 4 page range. So what's in the paper? So the paper has 4 parts. So number 1, the first part is to summarize the article in your own words. So it's a summary. Don't put a lot of little details in it. It's a summary. And it should be in your own words. Don't use the phrasing in the abstract. It should be in your own words. And there shouldn't be a lot of little details in it. It should be about the big ideas and the big things. And generally you should cover the 4 parts of the article we talked about. So it says here, keep in mind the parts of the empirical article covered in class. So there should be some stuff about the introduction, about what the research questions are. What's the theory that they're using, or what's their idea about how these things are connected? How do they get their data? Again, remember, don't have a lot of small details, but probably should know, what age the people are, what sort of research methods they use, not necessarily the specific names, but was it self-report, was it observer report? How did they get the data? Did they collect it in school? Did they collect it in the house, in the home of people? Was it in the lab? Things like that. You can summarize the findings. So you can summarize the findings in terms of what they found, in terms of their statistics. And then summarize what the findings mean. So again, remember, it's a summary. I think the better summaries would be a half a page. And definitely do not spend more than a page on the summary. If you're more than a page, it's not a summary anymore. So again, the better introductions are a half a page, and definitely not more than a page. And then the second part, and the summary should be a paragraph too. If you're more than 1 paragraph, you're probably not doing a summary. The second part of the paper is critiquing the methodology. So thinking about how they got their data, who they got their data from. Discuss both the positive aspects of this and limitations. So do a method critique about how they got their data, who they got their data from. And again, talk about both positive and negative aspects. In my mind, a really well-written, concise critique of a methodology could be done in half a page. If there's something really, really, really important and deserves attention and some discussion, maybe longer than half a page. But you better be sure that it's really important and really interesting. So I would advise you to try to stick around that half a page mark. It could be 1 paragraph where you have the positive aspects and the limitations in one, or you can have 2 smaller paragraphs. And as we're going through here, actually we're getting into the issue of what things are the most important for your grade. The first thing, the summary, is the least important part of the paper. You need to do it, but it's a summary. It's a summary of what other people said, so it's not going to carry a lot of weight for your grade unless you do a horrible job in doing it, and then it will have some points that will come with it, but it's the least important because it's not about you. There's not much thought there. The second least important part of the paper is the critique. Yes, I want to see that you're thinking about the methodology, but it's not going to carry a lot of weight for your grade. Anybody can kind of rip apart methodology, so I want you to think critically about it. Again, the positive and negative aspects of it, but don't go on and on about it because it's not that important for your grade. It carries some weight, but not a lot. The last two parts of the paper are the most important for your grade. So the third part is about what insights you gain from reading the article in terms of development. So how people develop, risk in development, how to promote optimal development. So just these questions about development. So what did you learn about development? So I would phrase number 3 as, what did you learn about development? What new ideas, what new thoughts do you have about the topic you were looking at based on reading the article? This is a very important part of your paper in terms of your grading because it has to do with your deeper thinking. Again, remember, obviously we know that this is a 200 level class, so most people are sophomores would be in this class. So I'm not expecting like some sort of doctoral dissertation level thinking. But I want to see your thinking. I want to see what you're thinking and what you learned. That, I would say, if you're a really good writer and can write concisely and well, it's at least a page. Maybe it's a page and a half. It could maybe even be 2 pages. So if you did well, and the first 2 parts are a half a page each, so you only have a page here, that's 1 page, and you add 2 pages of this, that would be nice. So at least a page and as much as 2 pages, I would imagine, for part number 3. And then we have part number 4. So part number 4 is also quite important for your grade because it has to do with your deeper thinking. So a really important skill to learn is not just to read something and say, okay, I learned this and that. It's to be able to ask questions based on that reading. So as you're reading that article, what questions do you have that go beyond it? Like, oh, what else is happening here? Or could this be happening? Would it look different if we looked at different people, different ages, or maybe a different context? So number 4 is about extending beyond the study. So is there something that you can say that goes beyond what was in the articles? So 3 is kind of about, you've read what they said, and you say, oh, that's interesting, I learned this, and I thought about this because of what they said. Number 4 is more about, hey, I have a different idea. I have a way of thinking beyond what the author said. So I would recommend, as you're reading the article, is to write down somewhere your questions as you're going along. Oftentimes, this thinking about additional things, comes from that first reading. You read through it and you go, well, what's going on here? And what's this? And what if I looked at this? Would it be different? So write down those questions. So that's what part 4 is. Part 4, I would say bare minimum a half a page if you write really well, but probably a whole page would be great. So if you're aiming for the top, half a page for part number 1, half a page for part number 2, so that's 1 page. Part number 3, 2 well-written pages where you explore different things. And so that will be 3 pages. And then part 4 will be 1 page where you explore these ideas. There's some flexibility, obviously. So if you have a lot of ideas about 4 and you want to do a page and a half about that, that would be great. That's fantastic, as long as you have really interesting things to say. So you can have some flexibility there. I'm just giving you some rough guidelines. So that's what's in the paper. And so let's go and deal a little bit with how do we actually select we. I'm using the we because I'm not doing this. All of you are, so it's a we. So how are we going to find an empirical study? So some of you know how to find studies already. If you do, knock yourself out. That's fine. Just remember, email me only the citation and the abstract, nothing else, and no links for pre-approval. So the first thing I want to show people is, this is here on Blackboard, and probably I should go back to the weekly modules. So I decided to create an independent weekly module just for the study review paper. So if I go into that one, you'll see that there's 3 things. There's examples of, oh, actually there'll be 4 things. There'll be this video. I will place this video in this module. And so there's 2 examples of abstracts to help you identify what's an empirical article. And then here's the paper assignment. So this is where you turn in the paper, is right here. So let's look at these abstract examples. So sometimes people say, oh, how can I know if it's empirical? So I placed 2 examples here, and there's a little bit of help with them. We'll have to make this smaller. There we go. So here's one example. So some big cues about what's an empirical study is if there's a sample and they specify it. So here they specify a sample. There should be some sort of research methodology. So there's something about interviews here, so interview methodology. And there should be something about the results of the study. So the major findings were, so these 3 things really strongly indicate to me that this is an empirical article and would be proper for this assignment. So when it has to do about development, it's pretty broad. Just remember that we're a child and adolescent development class. So please don't do something about old age. We're not that type of a class. We are into children and adolescents. And so please choose an appropriate thing, but there's a broad range of things that you could do that are related to development. So for example, this thing's related to adolescent development. And not sure why that didn't close. There we go. And so there's this one. And so, again, this is the abstract. So how can we tell if it's empirical? Well, here's our 3 cues. Does it specify a sample? Yes, it does. It says they studied twins. And so here it means monozygotic and dizygotic, so identical and fraternal twins. So it specifies a sample. It also says that this study investigated, so that should be a clue. There's a study there. There's a research method, so they assessed the kids with some sort of checklist. And there's findings. Analyses revealed, blah, blah, blah. So these are the 3 big cues to whether something is empirical. And is it developmental? Certainly is. It's about early childhood. So it's something to do about development. So again, development can be a lot of different things. So that's the way to identify empirical articles. So how do you find your articles? So there's different ways. I like Google Scholar because Google Scholar is more about natural language. What does natural language mean? It means that you can sort of use phrases that you're used to talking about in everyday life, and Google Scholar will be a pretty good way of searching for things using everyday phrases. Some of the database searches that are more academic, they tend to want to have like keywords that they understand, and if you don't use the right words, you might not find what you're looking for. So Google Scholar a lot of times is a good alternative. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a search in Google Scholar. So you can just put in what you're interested in. So let's say I'm interested in vaping and adolescents vaping. And so I get a lot of hits here. Probably want a more recent study, so I would prefer if you got a more recent study. So I'm going to do since 2017. And there's different things here. I can kind of see what it is. And let's say I'm interested in this. I'm interested in how, let's say I'm an education major, and I'm curious how schools can influence this behavior. Well, here it says schools influence adolescent e-cigarette use, and it says but when, so it looks like there's some context there. So two nice things here. One is sometimes in Google search you actually can get the article right away. If you see PDF on the side here, you probably can get the article without going into our library system. And so here I can actually download this if I want to. I can read the whole abstract. So I want to read the abstract to see if it's empirical. And it looks like there's a sample. There's a huge sample. And they did some sort of survey methodology. Sorry about that, survey methodology. So there's a method. And I have it too small, so when it says something like models indicated a general decrease. So if you kind of read this, it looks like there's the results are analyzed. So the results of this survey with all these kids in high school and middle high school sounds like it's empirical to me. So you can download it. So that's how you got this article. Let's say that there wasn't this little PDF thing here. What you can do is you can take the title. And you don't have to take the whole title. I'm just going to take this part. I don't think there's many things that are titled like this. You can go into the CWI library. So if you search on your web browser CWI library, this should be your first hit. This is a first hit when I use the search engine that's on my computer. So this is the library's website. I prefer you use databases. So you can go into the databases. And very nicely, the best database is the first one listed, Academic Search Complete. Go ahead and click that. You have to be logged in, so I'm not logged in at the moment, so I have to log in. So they only give the free stuff to people that are part of CWI. They don't give it to everybody. So I can simply paste the title in here and search. And here it is. And oftentimes you'll see that there is the full text here. So if I click that, I'm going to click it into a new tab, and it should kind of look familiar. I can download this. I can save this, and then I have the article. So that's how you can find the article through the Google Scholar. If you find an article but you think it's a little bit old and you want something that's newer, there's a little trick here, cited by. So if you click this, it will give you articles that cited that article, and of course they'll be newer than that article. So it shows there's a global thing about tobacco use, there's e-cigarettes, so there's newer studies. So that's one trick that Google Scholar gives you. Okay, so this is, again, the CWI library. So sometimes what you can do, you can also scroll down and see what some other articles are in the CWI library, see if you like them better. That's certainly fine. I could also do the search here. So let's say I don't want to do Google Scholar for some reason. So I'm going to put the same search term, adolescent vaping, or adolescents vaping. So maybe it's good to choose the suggestion here, and you can search it. And I got 800 plus things. So you can also do the search this way. I would look for articles where there's a PDF full text. This one doesn't. You might be able to get it, but who knows. So I would look for the things that there's already a PDF present for it. So that's how you do the searching. So I think that's relatively easy, I hope. And so just to wrap up this video, I know it's a little bit lengthy, but this will help you do this assignment really well. So pre-approve the article, email me simply the abstract and the citation. So if you were interested in, okay, I'll go back to the previous one. This one, you can click on this. So if you're in the CWI library, you can click on this. Here is, oh, it's not really fantastic. But basically you can, if you have something like this, I'm okay if you send me this. This is really messy. Anyway, I'm kind of kind of perturbed by how they did this. Actually, you might go backwards and put it into Google Scholar. So that sounds horrible, but that's what I would like you to do. Why? It's going to save you a lot of hassle because this is really messy. It's actually really ugly. I don't know why they have it like that. So, you know, here's the article. You want to send me the abstract? Go to this quotes. Go to these quotes, cut and paste the abstract, bam, you have it already. So it's probably a little bit easier doing it with a Google Scholar. So you can go backwards. If you use the CWI library, cut and paste the title into Google Scholar and just use that citation. It will save you some time. And by the way, if you think, oh, well, this is really something really great, I didn't know that existed, I'm going to use this to do my references sections. Be careful because this has a lot of APA mistakes. APA style doesn't matter when you email me. I don't care about APA style. We care about APA style later, and I can tell you, looking at this, there's APA errors in this citation. So they say it's APA, there's errors here. But for this emailing me the reference, this is a good way of doing it. And then email me the abstract. And maybe this is actually a little bit better. So here we have the abstract. It's right here. It's quite long, but that's okay. And so you can cut and paste the abstract into an email. So just a citation and the abstract in the email me, and I will say whether it looks good or not. And I think that's it. So if you have any questions, let me know, but I think this video has been very elaborate and extensive about this assignment. So good luck on the assignment. If you have questions, let me know, but I think I covered a lot of stuff here. So have a good week.